2020 was a scary year, but 2021 is going to be scarier, at least for video games. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on GameRanks, the top 10 new horror games of 2021. Starting off at number 10, it's Returnal, a third-person shooter within the framework of a science fiction psychological horror story where you are stuck in a time loop repeatedly traversing a world that more or less seems to have a cosmic horror thing going on. What's interesting is this uses a time loop to create a sort of roguelike situation in which the world and all of the things in it develop based on events. You have to essentially face cosmic horror with high-tech weapons, dealing with both visions and entities that are trying to end you. Returnal is a PlayStation 5 exclusive. It'll be landing on March 19th, 2021. At number 9 is The Medium, a game that I think does something pretty interesting in terms of the actual mechanics of the game. You control a character that exists in two different realms, the real world and the spirit world, and all of your moves are the same in either. However, obviously there are different things in both, so on a split screen you'll be moving around in both worlds, and you'll need to do things in one world that affect the other to continue your progress. There's a pretty fair amount of influence from Silent Hill, not just in the idea that there's two worlds, but in the sort of perspective that the camera seems to move around in, as well as the fact that Silent Hill's composer, Akira Yamamoto, is doing the music. But I think this is actually one of the more interesting ideas for a game that doesn't just try to scare you with an interesting story and aesthetics. It's also pretty specifically trying to introduce a mechanic that, for all intents and purposes, can be pretty novel and interesting. The Medium is an Xbox Series X and Microsoft Windows exclusive. It comes out January 28th. At number 8 is Sons of the Forest, a survival horror game intended to expand upon the world introduced to us in The Forest. If you recall the original game, you're essentially surviving after a plane crash where these absolutely horrible cannibals that you more or less have to deal with. The difference in this second game is that it appears that everybody is sent in with the intent to hunt. There is still a crash, and you are still off guard. However, you're a little bit more prepared for actually taking on mutants. When The Forest came out in 2014, it was pretty much a landmark survival game. It did a lot with story that survival games frankly just don't, but mechanically it's also among the best. This sequel looks like they have done a lot more with it, and I'm quite interested to see exactly how it lands. We don't have an exact date, but it is announced for a 2021 release. At number 7 is the System Shock remake, which, very interestingly enough, the development team has developers from Fallout New Vegas, Mass Effect, and I would say most importantly BioShock, all games that you can actually feel the System Shock influence on, as well as bringing various developers who worked on System Shock 1 to collaborate as well. This has really been a passion project of Night Dive Studios if you've paid attention to the development of it. It hasn't been an easy road for them. It's been one of those projects that has expanded in scope and was originally Kickstarter funded and required more money to do on the level that they were doing it on. But at the same time, it's been a project that it's hard to argue that anything other than fans of the series would really want to do. And again, bringing in developers from all those different franchises, which I think are kind of clearly influenced by System Shock, is an indication that they're going to be going the right direction. They've tried to do things like refresh some of the gameplay elements that haven't aged well, as well as obviously bring next generation graphics to the series. I'm excited to play this game. I remember System Shock. Part of the reason I probably wouldn't want to go through it now is, again, some of those elements haven't aged that great. So assuming they don't screw anything up, I think it's actually potentially the best version of this game. Now, we don't have an exact release date, but 2021 is apparently when we're going to be seeing it, and we will be keeping our eyes open. At number 6 is Scorn, a Tool album cover come to life. Scorn takes place in a techno-organic structure which has either been built or grown or both, and presents us with a world where organic things do all of the same stuff as mechanical things. The game is intended to just throw you into a world and not give you a lot of context, so that you have to spend time figuring out what on earth is even going on. I think it's a very interesting looking game, but I also think due to the kind of lack lack of information that they've put out has a kind of resemblance to Agony, which, if you recall, was pretty mysterious up until release and then was kind of just a little bit too generic to be good. Now, that isn't necessarily what this is, but in terms of things I'm looking out for is how much is it like that? Hopefully not much. Scorn is coming out to Xbox Series X and Microsoft Windows sometime this year. At number 5 is Unholy, a game that seems to really do something weird. You are a mother looking for her abducted child, but you're doing it in the last city on a dying planet, which is frankly full of terrors and ruled by a repressive regime with the ultimate goal of escaping. Now, this isn't a game where you're going to be blazing your way through hell with a huge gun. It's actually a stealth game, and I think potentially is a lot scarier for that reason. On top of that, the city itself is truly a nightmarish looking place that's split into various social castes which you can actually impersonate, which sounds like a lot of interesting potential in terms of stealth gameplay. Unholy makes its way to PC sometime this year. At number 4, it's GhostWire Tokyo, a first-person action-adventure game with psychic and paranormal abilities, in which spirits have invaded Tokyo, while all of the citizens of the city have also totally disappeared, and you have to fight them. The developers call the combat in this game karate meets magic, and the gentleman working on the combat team heading it is Shinichiro Hara, who was the one who worked on the combat for 2016's Doom. And aesthetically speaking, it is a very interesting looking game. This is a game that was announced back in June 2019, so I'm fairly excited to see it land. It's always looked cool, and when it hits PlayStation 5 and Microsoft Windows in October, I'll be ready to check it out. At number 3 is Little Nightmares 2, a puzzle platformer which intends to scare you. It is a continuation of the original game's story, which is about a 9-year-old girl who has to sneak around in this massive underwater submarine with a lighter trying to escape. Little Nightmares 2 is about getting through the Pale City to eventually beat the Thin Man who is controlling the city from a signal tower which is using television to control the populace. Little Nightmares features a new character, necessitating teamwork, and in truth, I'm really excited for this game because the amount of suspense that the first generated aesthetically, as well as giving you at least a decent puzzle platforming experience, this sequel is an opportunity to build on the decent mechanics but amazing world building of the first. Little Nightmares 2 is landing on Nintendo Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and Microsoft Windows on February 11th. At number 2 is the Outlast Trials, the prequel to the other 2 games in the Outlast series, in which you play as a test subject in a Cold War experiment. Now, it takes a lot of the dynamics of the original Outlast games and makes it so you can play them with up to 4 other players, with the idea that you are being tested in terms of methods of brainwashing and mind control by an evil corporation called the Murkoff Corporation. Probably the most interesting aspects about it are the change in setting. The Cold War is often a very interesting time period to set games in, but also the co-op has me pretty interested in it as well. There is still an Outlast 3 coming, so I mean, this could be a very interesting diversion for the series, or it could end up being something important that influences the rest of the series, depending on exactly how well it's received. The Outlast Trials does not have a release date yet. It is landing on Microsoft Windows sometime this year though. And finally, at number 1 is Resident Evil Village. This one is set a few years after Resident Evil 7 and will feature the same protagonist, Ethan Winters, who has to deal with Chris Redfield showing up and changing the course of things. There's also been some interesting reveals, including a 9-foot-tall vampire lady that Twitter can't seem to stop talking about, but it really looks like it's leaning into the more absurd elements of Resident Evil that we all know and love. This game has seen about 4 years of development, so it's been going on in the background of pretty much all of these Resident Evil remakes, and uses the same engine. It is going to be a first-person game like Resident Evil 7, and given how much of a pleasant surprise 7 was, I'm pretty excited for where it goes. I have no idea why Ethan is in Europe in some random village, but I'm interested to find out. Resident Evil Village will be landing on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and Microsoft Windows sometime this year. Couple of quick bonus games for you. First, Evil Dead the game, which looks to be quite a bit along the lines of a Left 4 Dead, plus with player versus player, set in the Evil Dead franchise's universe. We don't have an exact release date for it, but it's supposedly coming to all major consoles as well as PC sometime this year. And the Dark Pictures anthology, House of Ashes, the third anthology game from the Until Dawn developers, Supermassive Games, it promises to build on the same kinds of gameplay we've seen in previous titles from them, including Until Dawn and its sequel. House of Ashes is coming to all major platforms sometime this year. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, a sequel to a 2004 action RPG that a lot of people hold very dear. Back for Blood, a spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead, brought to us by the developers of Left 4 Dead, Turtle Rock Studios. Which of these games are you looking forward to? Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now is of course a good time to do so. I upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is of course a subscription, so click subscribe. Do not forget to enable all notifications, and as always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconHero. We'll see you next time right here on Game Ranks.
Said you could do anything, kid, you could go far. You could be the president, fireman, race cars. The sky's the limit, kid, so shoot for the stars.